now that we're segueing into females and the supernatural, I'll go ahead and get back to Kaelyn subject. So I'm going to try to do something quick because you've already kind of covered that, but I wanted to kind of complement it with Vampires by Jose Larraz, Vampires with a Y. And, this is a movie I read about in some books in the 90s, and then I got a copy from Video Search. I immediately fell in love with it, and I reviewed it in some paper briefly. And to me, it's like, if you're looking for eroticism, uh, just raw eroticism, like just raw sex between two women and sometimes a man. It's one of the ultimate lesbian vampire movies. I mean, and it's about the only one that actually ever has aroused me sexually. That just never happens. But it did happen the first few times I watched this movie because these women are just magnificent and mostly nude for long trip periods, and then the rest of the time in their long black robes. And they basically stalk the countryside, looking for victims. And they snare one of them, what's her name? Marianne Morris is the actress. I can't think of the character. It's a real short name. But anyway, she kidnaps sort of this guy that she picks up, and she basically just kind of feeds on him slowly over a period of days. She fucks the living hell out of him. It's not hardcore, but it's super close. And she's draining him, and he doesn't quite really realize what's happening.
The character's name you were looking for is Fran, by the way. I just Googled it real quick.
Yes.
Fran,
the least vampiric name ever. Fran.
I know.
Really
and that's deliberate. When he says, as in Francis. No, Fran.
Fran.
She is so cool too and seductive, but I was a little disappointed when I found out that that voice is not Marianne Morris. It was dubbed by another actor. But then the other one is played by, I think her name was Anulka, a blonde
which is the
model.
greatest vampire name ever. They just should have named the character Anulka, because that's like, what? You got to be kidding me.
Right, that is a really good vampire name, honestly.
Yeah. Genre Lynn would have done it, even if it was the actress's name. Oh, that'll save me money right in the script. Yeah. But basically, once you finally find out that, yes, the blonde girl is with Fran and that they both live in the mansion, then they really start victimizing this guy. But then they kind of slack off, and you get a feeling that Fran has a very tiny soft spot for him. And might not be like, I love him, or he's my friend, or feel sorry for him, but maybe like, he's really such a great meal. He's really, I just want to prolong this meal for as long as possible. And because he's so yielding to it. And because he's being stimulated sexually too. So I mean, it's really that collision of that concept, like head on, pardon the pun. And it's just, to me, it's powerful, a powerful erotic kind of charge, and very European. It's a Spanish movie. Well, it's a Spanish movie, yes. And I don't know. It never really goes off the rails. Basically, it follows what you think. The main gimmick or concept is that in the beginning, you see them totally naked, having sex, flopping around a bed, and somebody comes in and shoots them, and from the POV shot, and they're dead. So you figure out, okay, they're undead. Somehow after getting shot, they became vampires. That's whatever. And the guy finds Fran familiar. And then there's a little more dialogue at the end about when the vampires are destroyed, or they go out into the sun, and I don't know. It's not as graphic as Daughters of Darkness, but somebody else tries to buy that house, and the realtor or whatever is saying, this is the house or whatever, and one of the people says, well, I heard this rumor that our girls were murdered here, and the killer always comes back to the scene of the crime. So I guess you're supposed to think that our main guy, I can't remember his character name either, killed them in the beginning, forgot them totally for some reason, whatever, and then was drawn back there. Doesn't recognize, maybe because they're undead, I don't know. It's some kind of weird thing, but sort of recognizes Fran, and then they prey on him. Is it revenge? I mean, is it the killer? I mean, because he doesn't seem to have the intention to kill them. When I first watched it, I thought, okay, so it's almost like being reincarnated. He comes back years later, and he's going to kill these vampires. And that's why he's having sex with this woman. And then I thought, man, did you not just watch the movie? I mean, they totally victimize this guy. He's without a clue. All he says is, "You look so familiar." So I don't think he's doing that. I think maybe he wiped that out of his memory, which, but I don't know how they turned into vampires. That's really the only sticking
I think
point.
you're thinking about this more than the screenwriter did, because that actually is interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard fans mention it, but I don't know if Larraz cared or not. And I don't know if it's important to really the vibe of the movie. I think the beginning of the movie is a deliberate, whatever you want to call it, not a red herring, but he throws it at you, and then it's up to you to reconcile it with the rest of the movie, or just discard it altogether and just think, oh, it's a cool shot of two naked women getting blown away, and the way to begin a movie, And a lot of movies started that way back then, with that kind of like immediate
which incidentally
action.
is a little misogynistic, so that's fun.
Well, his character. I think
it says here Brian Deacon of his Ed and two Nazis in it, and also Bessie Love, the silent film star, is in it too.
Brian Deacon, he has a small role. See, there's a couple that's vacationing there too, and they kind of weave into it. They're like kind of the audience surrogates, the good guys, and they meet unpleasant fates too. I mean, and then Anulka picks up a dude, and they're partying with him, and his fate is extremely gruesome. I mean, they just pounce on him and just basically rip him apart.
Yeah, that's a cool scene.
It's feral as hell. So, but she's saving her little pet, keep him on his chain. So that's the movie. But I just wanted to say, I think it stands out as an erotic movie. I think it stands out as a lesbian erotic movie. Lesbians might like it. I know tons of white males would love it. Straight males would love it, because that's like a fetish. I'm just gonna say I'm one of the only men on earth that's not a fetish for me. Seeing two women have sex, it doesn't bother me. It's pleasant, but it doesn't like go yeah. But and if y'all do, that's cool. But what I'm saying is that if you do, this is a great movie to watch. That's all I'm gonna say, because I've had friends who are like that, and they're like, "Did you see vampires? Oh my god." The shower scene is really like, they're out of control. It's like these two women were really fucking, the actresses. It's too real, but shot just enough away from, the privates. And I like it. I think it's classic. Larraz's movies are a mixed bag, and I've been disappointed with some after that. And then I've been pleasantly surprised by a couple. Symptoms is really interesting. Black Candles is just pure trash, and it's extremely graphic in a lot of ways that I won't even get into, that are out of control. So anyway, let me go on to the final blow, the coup de grace. So it's Tomb of Dracula. I put a picture of the comic last time. So Tomb of Dracula is like a 1981 anime film, a feature-length anime film, and it was, I don't really know why they made it, quote unquote, except I'm pretty sure they did not get any legal approval from Marvel to make it. But Marvel was aware of it, but they didn't really.
That would shock me. I don't think
now, but
Marvel was different in the late 70s.
Yeah, I don't think it's like, I don't think like Marvel was like, oh no, we're gonna have to pay Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan some extra money. That wasn't gonna happen.
That wasn't going to happen. It was more like, we want to make money off this Japanese movie with our character, like Spider-Man. They were aware of him. But they never talked about this movie. 81, I was in junior high. I was reading Tomb of Dracula. I would have been perfect audience. I didn't know much. I'd really know nothing about MA, but surely I would have heard of it. But nope, never heard of it. Never came on TV, or never, as far as I know, never played here in America.
My guess, and I don't know for sure, my guess is this was they went to Marvel and said, if we give you $10,000, can we have the rights to make this? Marvel said, that sounds good, because no one's going to make any of our crap into movies and make money on it. And that was it. And they're not going to publicize it because, at that point, they got all the money from them they were going to get. If it sold another unit, it wasn't going to do Marvel any good. So
I'm almost surprised that
I knew about the Frankenstein movie, but I didn't know it was based on I didn't know it was based on Marvel. I just seen the VHS, and it wasn't even clear that it was based on the Marvel version.
What is
I just
this?
knew there was an anime Frankenstein.
Yeah, there is an anime. It came out about
based
the same
on the
time.
Mike Flug Frankenstein.
I don't think so. Was it?
Oh, he's saying there is. It was.
Oh. Well,
I don't know.
It was based on the Marvel monster of Frankenstein, but I didn't know that until recently. I hadn't
Okay,
seen it,
I'll have to
but
dig around
I'd
for that.
seen the videotape in the store, and I didn't realize it was based on the Marvel comic.
Is it Japanese?
Yes.
Yeah. See, I think they were kind of on a roll, and I do think, Bill, your theory is very sound. However, they did do a few things that make me wonder if they didn't trust Marvel should not come after them. For instance, they slightly changed the names of some characters, completely changed the name of a couple of characters, though they were similar names. The main big thing is they didn't use Blade. Right. So Blade could have been optioned even as far back as then. You know, it could, I have a theory that Stan Lee, you know, when he was optioning everything, and most of that turned into disasters, I think he probably optioned. It's like when he optioned the Human Torch, but didn't option the Fantastic Four, so they had to do the FF cartoon without him. So all this legal shit that Stan Lee didn't know what the fuck he was doing. You know, he's like, give me some money, get these characters out there. All right. I don't care whatever it's made.
And that's probably what Marvel asked him to do. You know,
of course. That was
some
basically
more money out
his
of this.
job. That's why they promoted him.
Like
and
the
sent him
plan
out
for that
to
Human
California.
Torch was like to catapult burning dummies. Sounds really stupid.
I do wonder if maybe Blade didn't show up because they just didn't want to have a black character in a film that was really made for Japanese TV audiences. And if they had,
none of the characters
would it have been well portrayed? Because you look at some of the black characters and say Kimba the White Lion, and it's like, yikes.
Yeah.
But they got pretty sophisticated with black characters in the 90s, at least, by anime.
Yeah.
But
that's
you're
the
right.
other thing that was like
81's a weird era.
Yeah. There's this like issue because there's fascination with blackness and black cultures and black people and characters and all of that in Japan, but then there's also this like very intense anti-black racism at the same time. So it's like they'll do characters and they'll include those things, but there's also been, and like I'm getting this from black friends who've been to Japan and such, there's also that racism there too. So I feel like there's like a degree of like, oh, this is really interesting, we're going to take this for our media, and you know, people do the same exact thing in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, we've
insert everything about blaxploitation here.
It's just like now, you're right. It's like now we're aware of what we're doing and to what degree we want to do it and how authentic and non-offensive
decisions need to
as
be
possible.
made about how much, you know, creatives are going to keep perpetuating that and how much audiences are going to keep contributing.
Get Bill's theory, I believe they changed the names a little, so maybe they were just being like extra careful. So Quincy Harker became, because when I read the movie credits as they were scripted on something, and they in the script they all have the exact same names as the comic, but what actually when they dubbed it into English, they changed them. So Quincy Harker becomes Hans Harker. Frank Drake and Rachel Van Helsing kept their names. I don't know if they thought Frank Drake, that's a common name. Oh yeah, Van Helsing, that's a common name. Or it's in the public domain. I don't know. They changed the name of the dog Saint into Elijah. And I gotta say, they gave him an extra power. That's very cool. He doesn't just sense vampires. He kind of like senses evil, and he can kind of like, he warns Quincy, or I'm just gonna call them by their real names, but he warns Quincy, and you know, but I don't know. There's something like very Japanese about it, and I love it. And of course I love animal.
He's a good boy.
Animal characters, and he's very like, he saves the day once or twice just by his ability to. It's almost like he has a non-verbal telepathy towards the undead, you know, and those kind of forces, and he can relay it to Quincy, you know. So Quincy's like, good boy, here comes some vampires, let's go. And so then that's all the Vampire Hunter, you know, those are the guys from the comics. Their dynamic is very close to the comics. They play Frank like he was originally played when the comic started with Jerry Conway, as a little younger or a ladies' man, doesn't take things seriously, even though he knows he's Dracula's descendant. Not the mature character that Marv Wolfman, you know, matured. Rachel's about the same. She's got her arrows and she's ready to kill a vampire any second. And Quincy's the same. Am I forgetting someone? Oh yeah, Dracula. Well, there's other characters too from the comic books. The central plot is about Domini, and by coincidence, when I was a kid, the first
Is Hannibal
Dracula
King in it?
No. That's another notable. But it is
Lilith shows up, doesn't she? If I remember right,
yes,
Lilith
Lilith
show
is
up?
a character.
Okay.
I like Lilith.
Yeah.
Issue 45 of Tomb of Dracula, I bought off the stand. Okay, my mom bought it. It had Blade and Dracula fighting. It was like the second appearance of
Nice.
Hannibal King. And it was the first appearance of Domini and the satanic cult ruled by a guy named Anton Lepesky, supposed to be LeVay, but with a crazy mask with horns. Incredible Gene Colan art. And they're just kind of sacrificing her upside down on a cross. And he comes in and he grabs her and he's like, I claim this woman as mine. So all of a sudden you see part of Dracula you haven't seen in the comic. Something is drawing him to her. And they explored this shit in depth in the anime. I'm not saying it all matches Wolfman's. Most of it does. Some of it's extrapolation, but it's interesting. So he rescues her and they think he's Satan. So and he doesn't let them think otherwise. So he marries Domini, and then it gets to the point where he pretty much has to admit to Domini, I actually love you. And in the anime, they touch on this a little in the comics, but in the anime, they have a longer flashback where he talks about how he became a vampire. And it's a little different than his comic origin, similar, but he portrays himself, of course, as a hero of his people. And he admits to impaling his enemies because he was trying to protect his homeland. It's just anything a general will say, to justify war, whatever, and to secure our borders. He gives her, and she's like, oh, I understand. She's like doe-eyed. And then he's like, and then I was killed, and then I was sentenced to this horrible existence. So whenever she happens upon the vampire hunters, she pleads Dracula's case like that, like all pitiful, like, no, he really loves me. He was a victim all these she does have a whiny dubbed voice. So he was a victim all these centuries. Now it's different. And of course she becomes pregnant, just like in the comic books. Inexplicably, just like in the comic books. The like in the comic books, they quicker because it's only an hour 45 minutes. But this movie, basically, if you take the Blade and Hannibal King stuff out and Silver Surfer, this movie is an adaptation of number 45 until the last issue of Tomb of Dracula, number 70. All encapsulated in one movie. And I happen to think that last year and a half of Tomb of Dracula is some of the best comics.
Some of the absolute best.
I mean,
so you can imagine how happy I was to know that there was some, I was really getting into anime and there was an anime film that adapted some of my favorite stuff. You could just imagine how thrilled I was and how hard I tried to find this thing. And then I watched it.
Do you like it or not like it?
I absolutely despise every second of this. I was
wow.
I
mean, I get it has a
different
mood. It has a mood that can be off-putting. I get that.
Even as just anime, forget that I love Tomb of Dracula. I think the animation is really subpar.
Okay.
Now, I'm used to anime being limited in motion, but there's usually a lot of style to make up for it. And
it is kind of it's just a lot of generic action and action and horror tropes, and doesn't spend a lot of time, especially for that period where this was starting to become more of a thing. Not a lot of shading and valences on the colors and the lighting. It's a lot more flat.
Now, how would I feel if I hadn't read any of those Tombs of Dracula and watched it? I don't know. Maybe I would have liked it.
You'd probably like the plot.
I probably would have said, boy, this has got some cool stuff that most things don't have in it. But knowing what it came from and what was left out, and then watching, and this is the closest I'll ever see to Gene Colan being animated. It was like watching those old Marvel TV shows where they literally just cut the comic book, cut Jack Kirby stuff, and sort of waved them around. It's like
the thing is, everybody loved it though. That's what's so wild.
Yeah.
That was the power of those characters.
And when I first saw those cartoons, I wasn't reading comics, so that was the closest thing to a Stan Lee, Jack Kirby story that I'd gotten. So I liked him at the time. Watching them now, a little hard to do.
I watch them as kind of campy now, and just research like to refresh my memory, and they're fun.
They put those out on VHS, and I did see the Iron Man one as a kid, and it had a couple episodes of Spider-Man on it too.
I'll admit I've seen every episode of all of them.
The music was great.
Music was great. The suspense music
makes you feel. I mean, that's just every single one is different.
I groaned when I heard that song the first
when it showed up in Iron Man. Yeah, that was so fun.
And John Vernon did the voice of Tony Stark and of Namor, of Glenn Talbot in the Hulk. But anyway,
that's why they sound similar when I read them in my head.
Makes sense. I like it a lot, as it's kind of a fetishistic thing for me because it is the closest we're gonna get And I bought it at Heroes Con. I've been looking for it for years. It was like a golden grail, everything you said. And then I was like, it's kind of dopey anime, but I like some dopey anime. So I'm like, if I try to get in the mind of how is this person interpreting this story, that was okay. I mean, there's a lot of corny stuff in it, and like I said, a lot of deep romantic stuff between them that is in the comic, but it's a lot more syrupy and a lot more forgiving of Dracula, and a little more romanticizing Dracula. But I'm okay with that because I write it off as Domini's in love with him and she's crazy, because because she touches on her background in this. To the credit, they include some of that rough flashbacks in the script. If they'd included the rough flashbacks of Lilith, that would have been really rough. That stuff really scarred me as a kid, her origin. But she's in it, and so that's what happens the last year. Is he's with Domini. They have a son. The son becomes an angelic being who's born to oppose and destroy Dracula. The leader of the cult wants to get revenge because the guy's really not Satan, and they took Domini, and so he kills the baby, and then the baby comes back as the adult Janus, and he looks just like in the comics, same name, and he's got all the powers. And so after they kind of battle to a standstill, Dracula, is brought before Satan. Unlike in the comic book, he was with Topaz, which that was an incredibly powerful issue. But other than that, it's basically the same thing. You well, not exactly, but it's like in the movie, it's like you failed me, and you failed to do my bidding. In the comic, it's like you had the hubris to pretend to be me, in that cult, and so he brings him back to life, which makes him not a vampire. So it's like
so we get to see him eat a hamburger at McDonald's or whatever.
Yes, and so there's all these depressing and also extremely comical bits over the next few issues, and that's when Lilith decides, well, now I can kill him. I can finally kill so they adapt that. And after all that turmoil, he fights to be the head of the vampires again, and they do have the fight at the end. I think the worst thing for me was after he becomes the Lord of Vampires again, he's very changed for a while because he had to use the cross to fend off the other vampires.
Yeah, which is
they
cool.
Didn't go into enough depth on that.
No.
I mean, and then so he's kind of trying to redeem himself, but unfortunately bad timing because Quincy's going to finish him. And I thought the build up to that was very rushed.
Yeah.
And it didn't have the power of I mean, they tried to paraphrase even the last little thing of Dracula being a man or a person. So I give them an A for effort. I mean, all the rest is up to debate and subjective. But to me, it has a charm. So, but I'm glad it exists just because, like you said, no one else is going to do it. And the reason I like that it exists, even if people don't like it, is it makes anybody realize how great that work was. Want to go buy the comics. If it makes
people go buy the comic, then it does. And Henry, we were talking about this before everyone else came on. One thing no one can ever say about me, just because I hate this film. If I had to make a list of top 10 films, the only reason this one wouldn't be on it is that I've blocked it from my mind. But now that you've reminded me, it's definitely on it.
It's back
on it.
The
fact that I hate this film doesn't mean a damn thing to me. The fact that you got something, when somebody loves something I don't, I feel bad for myself because the world needs more love. And I would rather love all films. I'm sorry that there's some that I just, for whatever reason,
that's what I was trying
behind.
Yeah, I was trying to explain that to Scott in the chat about the vampire assistant. It's not that we all thought it was going to suck. It was just, well, first I wanted you to kind of be more concise about what you got out of it.
Yeah,
that's just a small criticism.
It is a complicated film to talk about.
Yeah, once you start reciting a plot like that then you're in the rabbit hole, and we're all like trying to pull you out. So,
I was kind of worried I was getting there with Blood and Roses a little bit, just because there was so much going on with that movie.
Well, see, not that one.
Stars of Darkness. Stars of Darkness is the one where I was just like, oh my god, it just keeps going. Like,
I'm looking. No, Kaelyn, I'm looking forward to, because I wasn't there for that part. I can't wait to actually watch the YouTube thing to hear you talk about that.
Guess
Yeah,
what
'cause-
movie I have on repeat?
Because like the
on my
Vampires
big
Assistant
TV.
is all full of these great characters that I never even got to mention. So
Yep, Daughters of Darkness.
I think what I really love about these panels where like we just kind of pick a theme, like, you know, we were all joking during the post-apocalyptic filming, like, oh, we need to do a vampire episode for Halloween because we keep on bringing up vampires. It just keeps coming up. It's like we get to see what everyone's enthusiastic about, like whether all of us like the same films or not. I think that everybody brings something different to the table, and I think that's what's so cool about this, and that's what's cool about
we were talking
film and
about
pop culture in general. It's like we all have our different taste, you know?
Right.